Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss Boris Johnson's latest speech addressing the concerns of the new coronavirus variant sweeping parts of the country, having already become the second most dominant form now, and how the government are considering further lockdowns regionally in order to try and control it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, despite experts screaming at the government to control our borders against new variants coming into the country, and even the Home Secretary Priti Patel claiming that she wanted to do this, Boris Johnson refused. And despite being knocked sideways by our own UK variant over winter, the news of a potentially just as serious, maybe more serious variant from India still didn't cause Johnson to heed the warnings. And now it's here, spreading rapidly. It's not yet all over the country. And this is a bit of a repeating problem now. Like, people will say, well, it's only a problem in the northwest of England at this point, really. But when a very transmissible form of the virus appears anywhere, it's not long before it's everywhere. The UK variant was only, people were saying at the time, oh, it's only a few little pockets in Kent. In and around Kent, that's where it is. When we first heard about it, it's everywhere now. It's the most dominant form now. And it didn't take long to become the most dominant form. That's the key thing. It didn't take months and months, just took weeks. This Indian variant is now spreading. It's already responsible for 15% of coronavirus samples so far this month. So we have an emergent situation that is going to yet again blow up in our faces because Boris Johnson thinks that expert advice is like political advice. Something that can be compromised to keep everyone happy. So we're here now. Anyway, what to do? Well, the first focus would be on the peeling back of lockdown restrictions, with the next layer set to be removed this coming Monday, and that is still going ahead. The idea of the government's latest roadmap is that we carefully remove restrictions and we never go back into them. That was his big promise. We will not rush out of lockdown, but we will never go backwards into tighter restrictions again. He said that we would ease the lockdown according to 4 tests. First, vaccine deployment continues successfully. Check. In theory, had supply issues knackered us, then this test may not have been met. But the rollout is proceeding very well thanks to the government's decision to use publicly funded NHS, not a privately funded t-shirt printing company. Or at least in terms of numbers, it's successful. There is a huge and growing inequality issue in that there's a growing gulf between vaccination rates between the affluent and the deprived. But in terms of the government's test, vaccination is going well. Second, that the vaccine reduces hospitalisations and deaths. This is the key with the vaccinations as far as the government is concerned. Remember, it's not about giving us immunity as a society. That's not happening right now. It's about reducing the severity of the illness. The lockdowns exist, the restrictions exist, not to try and beat COVID. We've never ever had a zero COVID strategy. It is to stop hospitals melting under the pressure. It is to say we can cope with this many people dying from it, but no more, because that's when hospitals are in trouble. As long as hospitals can cope, we don't get lockdowns. This test is also being met as far as may be told, although the problem and the reason for this press conference is because that is now in doubt in some parts of the country. Third is that the infection rates do not risk a surge in hospitalisations. Again, all about the NHS not collapsing under the pressure. Infection rates are not low. They are low enough in conjunction with the success of the vaccination programme that for most of the country there doesn't seem to be a specific threat to the NHS from it. You know, this is not to ignore the threat to individual members of staff in the NHS, many of whom already have long COVID now, and also in certain parts of the country. But Boris Johnson isn't really bothered about that. Fourth, the final test, is that the assessment of risk is not altered by concerns of new variants. Now, this test is not being met, of course. But Boris Johnson says he has seen no evidence to hold his lockdown easing. So here we have, the proof that Johnson was always going to go ahead with the roadmap according to the dates, not the data. But then we already knew this. However, However, in the press conference, it was noted that the June lockdown restrictions removal could be in doubt. Now, we don't know at this point if he's just saying it to make it sound, because we know that that test hasn't been met now. Is he just saying it to sound like he's taking it seriously, so that when he says, oh no, we can proceed as normal, that it looks like he's taken a carefully considered view? Or does he really appreciate the gravity of the situation? That's really crucial here. I mean, he doesn't want to risk upsetting people who are only giving him his boost in the polls because they think he's finally on top of the pandemic. You know, it's a case of facing up to the serious situation that we have with the new variant. Hence the press conference. This is why he started talking about regional restrictions. Now, this isn't something to criticise in itself, of course. The point has been made repeatedly that the infection rates are not the same across the country. You know, we had a situation last summer when we were coming out of the first wave lockdown, that we came out of it while some parts of the country, the rate was still going up. We were just looking at the overall national rate coming down because that was largely driven by the south of England, the more populated part of the country. But in the north of England, it was still going up. You know, if you have a good handle on where the problems are, absolutely focus in on suppressing infections in as small an area as possible. In fact, if Johnson had used the NHS to implement test and trace, then never mind whole regions, we could have been tackling this at the street level, you know, with well-funded local resources. Instead, he pissed our money away, spending it on his mates. The latest reports say that the government has been shown modelling which could produce a peak of double or even treble that of January if this new variant is as transmissible as the Kent variant and we do not do anything to stop it. And that's really the seriousness of the situation. That is why, you know, Boris Johnson has had to make this statement now. I mean, I'm not even sure I can comprehend how the situation would be if we even got to twice as bad as in January, because that was very, very, very bad, to the point where Johnson just had to lock down. He opened schools up for a day and then had to shut them. Needless to say, even Johnson wouldn't allow this, but we also know that he will not act to prevent further pain down the road. This has been the case throughout the emergency, but the political stakes are even higher now. As long as Johnson can keep easing the lockdown, and as long as the vaccinations seem to be carrying on going well, and there's no reason to suppose that they won't, I wouldn't have thought, even though he's now sounding caution about this June date, then he keeps his huge inflated poll rating. This is causing a meltdown in Labour, who are blaming all sorts of spurious things. But the second Johnson's promises falter, those polls will flip around again. As soon as he has to start initiating lockdowns, or even as soon as surges begin, it will turn around. Johnson has promised that the pandemic is coming to an end. He promised that we would have no more lockdowns and that the vaccine would deal with everything. He cannot keep those promises because this is not how either the vaccine or the virus works. He has not been honest about that. But he would ideally like, I think, to hold on until Labour has actually torn itself apart and Starmer, the one guy they fear because they have literally nothing on him, is fatally wounded. So now officials are talking about this, you know, of course, affecting the June the 21st final stage of lockdown being removed. There's suggestions that the northwest could be placed in lockdown, like they were last summer. That's relatively lower risk for Johnson because it's mainly Labour areas anyway. You know, it's like last year, wasn't it, when the Tory parts of the country, even when they had very high infection rates, you know, they thought the lockdown had ended because for them it had. You know, including the northwest, they were kept in restrictions if you were Labour areas. Of course, this party politicking from the government just gave the virus the green light to spread unchecked in Tory areas, leading to the second wave when the floodgates were opened in September. And the same thing will happen over this summer if the same attitude prevails. What is it they say? Sign of madness to do the same thing in the same way and expect different results. But there is something that the government can do, and that also fits in with their desire to do nothing. See, although the Indian variant is ripping through some communities, particularly in the northwest, it does seem to be amongst unvaccinated groups, which makes sense if the variant is not significantly resistant to the vaccine. So Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, has called for vaccinations in the area to be accelerated. And you would think this is to be a sensible way to approach it. You know, target the areas most at risk of the new variant. That would not only reduce the need for tighter restrictions in those areas, it would reduce the chance of transmission spilling out across the rest of the country. Now, the group responsible for vaccinations had indicated, before this press conference, had indicated that they're not prepared to alter their main priorities right now. In fact, they want to carry on with that. And then I saw reports coming out that Boris Johnson might be talking about the fact, no, we should do this. And I thought, well, that makes sense. Because that's not political. It's not party political. It's nothing that goes against conservative thinking. You're just changing your vaccine priority. But then Boris Johnson announced that they're going to accelerate vaccinations amongst the over 50s. Even a Conservative council leader at this point in the Northwest was face-palming. He noted that the surge was taking place amongst teenagers and those in their 20s and 30s. Prime Minister, we've got a problem with the Indian variant. It's ripping through teenagers and those in their 20s and 30s. What will we do? Accelerate vaccination of the over 50s. I mean, of course you would do that as well in those areas. But here's the thing. You've got this variant which could become the dominant strain. It's on its way, ripping through the Northwest. Why would you say, right, what we need to do is accelerate vaccinations for people in East Anglia? No. I mean, if vaccinations are the key route out of the pandemic for us, and that is what Boris Johnson keeps saying, it would make sense to target them where they will do the best work. And those priority targets need to be constantly under review when circumstances change. And, you know, it's absolutely amazing. In Blackburn, for example, in the Northwest, vaccinations had already been made available to anyone over the age of 18 in 3 wards as a result of local priorities, in an attempt to get on top of this before it gets out of hand. You know, we need to remember, that aside, is the single most important thing that experts keep calling for in terms of dealing with this is proper financial support for people who need to isolate. Without doing this, other measures will always be of limited value. So what we're talking about here, we've got the northwest of England, where the government have decided they're not now going to prioritise vaccinating people where we have the problem. And also, double whammy, it's a pretty deprived area of the country as well. They're exactly the sort of area where if people cannot afford to isolate, they cannot afford to be off work. So you're creating the conditions for this new variant to spread, and they're doing nothing to halt it. And this is what happens when you have politics poisoning your response. It really sticks in the craw of Conservatives to provide financial support for those who need it, when there are millionaires who wanting millions from the public purse. Well, I mean, they should be higher priority, of course. Because right now, even the national trend is showing an increase in the number of infections. It's not huge. You know, we don't know, the experts make it clear, we do not know that the R rate is above 1 at the moment, but it is close. And without intervention, that's where we're headed. Hence this announcement from the government. You know, if the rate of infection can actually rise over summer and we still have 2 very significant layers of lockdown to be lifted, one which is going to be lifted on Monday, then this autumn, if they get it badly wrong, is going to be a very bruising time for the Conservatives, as long as Labour hold it together until then. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.